She thought she knew everything about success, until one night she followed her most loyal employee home, and what she saw changed her forever. Claire Bennett, a powerful CEO in Chicago, built her empire with discipline, ambition, and zero tolerance for weakness. Her company thrived on results, not relationships. She believed hard work always paid off, until the night she secretly followed David Carter, the quiet, dependable employee who never asked for a thing. He didn't drive to a luxury apartment. He didn't dine out or unwind in comfort. Instead, he turned down a dark street on the south side into a crumbling building where two starving children waited by the window, hoping their father brought home food. Claire watched it all from the shadows, and in that moment, everything she thought she knew about success, about fairness, about herself, began to fall apart. But here's the real question. When a woman who has everything is finally forced to see the people behind her profits, will she change, or will she walk away pretending she never saw the truth? Stay with us. This story will challenge your beliefs, grip your heart, and just might restore your faith in second chances. Claire Bennett wasn't just successful, she was legendary. By the age of 42, she had turned a struggling startup in downtown Chicago into one of the most aggressive tech empires in the Midwest. She lived in penthouses, closed deals over $100 stakes, and wore discipline like armor. Her mantra? Work harder than everyone else, and the world will owe you nothing, but fear you anyway. Inside her office, a cathedral of glass and marble, there were no family photos, no clutter, no signs of sentiment, just numbers, charts, deadlines. People were resources, and resources were either efficient or expendable. But lately, something wasn't adding up. Despite high salaries and top-tier benefits, employee morale was dropping. More sick days, less innovation. A silent fog had settled over her workforce, and Claire didn't understand why. She blamed laziness. She blamed softness. But deep down, a quiet voice kept asking, or is it something you've been too proud to see? Then came David Carter. David had worked at the company for 6 years. He was reliable, invisible, never made waves. He stayed late, worked weekends, took on extra shifts without being asked. Claire had always seen him as a model employee, quiet, disciplined, and relentlessly dependable. But something didn't sit right. Why hadn't David moved up in 6 years? Why had no manager ever recommended him for promotion? Claire scrolled through his file one evening and found nothing remarkable. No warnings, no accolades, just silence. The more she thought about it, the more it gnawed at her. That night, long after most employees had gone home, Claire sat by the window of her office overlooking the glowing Chicago skyline. She watched David exit the building, a worn backpack slung over his shoulder, the last to leave as usual. She was about to return to her reports, but something stopped her. Why was she suddenly so curious about this man? Why did the idea of him leaving bother her more than the red ink on her quarterly report? Impulsively, Claire grabbed her coat, descended to the parking garage, and followed him. Not in a chauffeured town car, not with bodyguards or assistants, alone. What kind of CEO follows one of her employees into the night? And what was she really hoping to find? David's route took them far from the glossy skyscrapers of downtown Chicago, past the polished streets of Lincoln Park, beyond the reach of her world. They crossed into the south side, where buildings leaned like tired bones, neon flickered uncertainly, and potholes outnumbered trees. Claire parked her car discreetly and continued on foot. David climbed the stairs of a weathered apartment building, its brick walls scarred by time and graffiti. Claire stood in the shadows, heart pounding with adrenaline and something else. Guilt? From across the street, she peered into the dimly lit window. Inside, two children, one no older than 9, the other barely 5, rushed to the door as David entered. Their eyes lit up as he pulled out a small brown bag of food. They devoured it on the floor like it was a feast, tearing at plastic wrappers with tiny, eager hands. No plates, no silverware, no laughter, just survival. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The little girl tugged David's sleeve. "Daddy, will you be here for breakfast tomorrow?" David hesitated, just for a moment. Then he smiled, soft and weary. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be here. but Claire saw the flicker in his eyes. The kind of flicker that says, I don't know if I can keep this promise. Back in her car, Claire gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred through the windshield, but her thoughts were sharper than ever. This man, this employee she never truly saw, was raising 2 children in poverty, working himself into the ground just to feed them a cheap dinner. While she sat in a high-rise with catered meals and espresso on demand, he was choosing between overtime and being there for his kids. How many others were just like David? How had she missed this? The woman who'd built her empire on the principle that hard work always pays off was now staring at a truth she never wanted to believe. Hard work doesn't always mean survival. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She lay in her penthouse, haunted by the image of David's daughter asking about breakfast, the quiet desperation in his smile, the exhaustion in his shoulders, and her own blindness. Was this the cost of her success? Was her empire built not just on late nights and strategy, but on the quiet suffering of people she never bothered to know? What would you have done in Claire's shoes? Would you have knocked on the door and admitted you'd failed the very people who made your success possible? Or would you have walked away, pretending you hadn't seen anything? I'm sorry to interrupt the story here, but trust me, this is just the beginning of a transformation that will turn Claire's world upside down. Tell me, if you had the power to change someone's life, someone who worked for you, silently struggling, would you? And do you think Claire Bennett will have the courage to do what's right or return to the comfort of denial? Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this part touched you, drop a heart, tap like, and share this story with someone who believes leadership should start with humanity. Claire Bennett arrived at her downtown Chicago office before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, but her mind had been racing since she left the South Side. The image of David Carter's children sharing a bag of fast food on the floor of that crumbling apartment was burned into her memory. She couldn't unsee it, couldn't unfeel it. For the first time in years, the spreadsheets didn't matter. Profit margins felt irrelevant. She had always believed she was a fair employer, generous even. But now she wasn't sure anymore. At 6:02 a.m., she sent a message to Olivia Davis, her executive assistant. Subject, confidential task. Olivia, I need a report by end of day. I want a breakdown of every employee working more than 60 hours a week. I want to know how many are single parents, who's struggling, who's working double shifts, no filters, no corporate gloss. I want the truth. No context, no explanation. And maybe that's because Claire didn't fully understand what she was doing yet. But she knew one thing. She could never run her company the same way again. Still, a question haunted her. What if David wasn't an exception? What if he was just the first one she happened to see? That afternoon, Olivia handed her the report. Claire read it in silence. One name after another. Fathers with disabled children. Mothers working weekends to afford medicine. Employees living an hour outside the city because they couldn't afford rent near the office they helped build. She felt sick. Then her phone buzzed. David Carter. Hi, Miss Bennett. I saw you wanted to talk. I'm free tomorrow for lunch, if that still works for you. Claire stared at the message. He didn't mention the night she followed him. Didn't accuse. Didn't even seem surprised. Why do you think he stayed so silent? The next day, Claire chose a small cafe on a quiet street in the South Side. No PR team, no chauffeur. Just her and the weight of everything she'd ignored. David arrived 5 minutes early. He looked tired, as always, but polite, reserved, guarded. Thank you for coming, Claire said. Of course, Miss Bennett, he replied, sitting across from her. Though, I'm not sure why I'm here. There it was, the elephant in the room. She took a breath. David, I followed you the other night. He blinked, then nodded slowly. I figured. You parked 3 blocks down, right? Claire flushed. I didn't mean to violate your privacy. I needed to understand. David didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled softly. I've worked at your company for 6 years, never missed a deadline, never caused trouble, and you had to follow me through the cold just to realize something was wrong? The words hit harder than any shareholder meeting ever had. I'm sorry, she said, voice low. I had no idea. I know, David said. That's the problem. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe was quiet. the world outside muffled by snowfall. Then Claire leaned forward. I'm changing things. Not just for you, for everyone. Higher wages, childcare assistance, emergency funds. A full review of how we treat people. It's not going to fix the past, but I have to try. David didn't respond right away. His eyes searched hers, trying to decide if he could trust this version of her. Why now? He asked. She hesitated. Because I saw your daughter ask if you'd be there for breakfast. And for the first time, I realized the cost of building my empire might be the lives I never stopped to care about. David nodded slowly. They told me once that people like you don't change, that you forget us the moment you rise above us. Claire looked him in the eye. They were wrong. But were they? Can someone truly change after years of ignoring the human cost of their success? Back at her office, Claire called an emergency board meeting. Investors, executives, department heads, all summoned to the sleek, cold conference room that once felt like a throne room. This time, Claire didn't open with numbers. We've been measuring the wrong things, she said. Our success isn't in the profit margin. It's in the lives behind every line of code, every call answered, every email sent at midnight by a single mom who just wants to feed her kids. Some faces looked confused, others uncomfortable, but Claire didn't stop. We will raise base salaries, implement mental health programs, add childcare stipends, and we will stop pretending that working people to the edge is a badge of honor. One executive leaned forward. Claire, this could cost us millions. She nodded. Then it's a cost worth paying. Silence, shock, resistance. But under it all, something else. Hope. The meeting ended with uncertainty, but for the first time in years, Claire didn't feel numb. She felt real. That night, she walked the South Side again, not to observe, to understand. She listened, asked questions. She became the student in a world she once believed was beneath her, and slowly, something shifted. But will her board stand with her, or will they force her back into the old ways that made her rich and blind? We'll find out soon, but first, I'm sorry for pausing the story here. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let me ask you, do you believe someone like Claire can truly change the system from within? And if you were in David's shoes, would you trust her? Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far this story is reaching. If it touched your heart, please drop a like, leave a heart, and share it with someone who believes that change always starts with seeing the truth. 3 weeks passed since Claire Bennett walked the South Side and looked David Carter in the eye, vowing to change everything. And while her office still shimmered with its usual steel and glass perfection, something at the core of her company had shifted. The changes hadn't been subtle. Wages had been raised. Emergency grants had been distributed. A quiet, unused space in the basement was now a fully funded on-site daycare. But with every change came resistance. Investors grumbled. Executives whispered. Emails leaked. Some board members even suggested Claire take a health-related sabbatical. She didn't blink. Because for the first time in her life, Claire wasn't chasing projections. She was chasing people. Still, the doubt gnawed at her. Was it enough? Was it real change, or just a temporary echo of guilt? Then came the company-wide town hall. Employees filled the auditorium, some curious, others skeptical. David Carter stood in the back, arms crossed. Claire stepped onto the stage. No podium, no slideshow, just her voice and a truth too long ignored. I used to believe success was a number, she said, a figure on a screen, a percentage on a quarterly report. But I was wrong. She looked out into the crowd, the same people she once viewed as resources. Now each face had a name, a story. I followed one of our employees home, not to expose him, but to understand why a man who worked harder than anyone was still barely surviving. Xiong murmurs swept the room. I saw what I wasn't supposed to see. His children, their dinner, the weight in his eyes when he promised he'd be home for breakfast. And I realized I built this company on effort, but not on empathy. A hush fell. We're not just going to be a company anymore. We're going to be a community. The room was silent. Then a slow clap started near the back, then another, and then the entire room erupted. But would applause be enough to carry the momentum forward? Days later, Claire stood at the elevator with David, both waiting in silence. "You didn't have to do any of this," David finally said. "I know," she replied. "So why did you?" Claire turned to him. "Because I was wrong. And for once, I didn't want to hide behind a press release. I wanted to fix what I broke." David nodded. "Then, maybe we can start over." Weeks turned into months. Slowly, culture shifted. Managers began checking in, not for performance, but for well-being. Claire started having lunch with different employees each week. But it wasn't perfect. Some people left. Some pushed back. Change is rarely quiet and never easy. One morning, Claire arrived at her desk to find an envelope. No name. Inside was a crayon drawing, two kids, smiling, holding hands with their dad. Below it, scrawled in messy block letters, "Thank you for helping my daddy smile again." Claire stared at the paper, tears welling for the first time in years. That afternoon, she asked Olivia Davis to call a staff meeting, not for announcements, but for something else. She stood before her employees and held up the drawing. "I've closed billion-dollar deals, been on the cover of Forbes, but this is the first time I've ever felt successful." The room was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that held respect. The kind that came from knowing a leader had finally learned how to lead. And maybe, just maybe, this company wasn't just turning a profit anymore. It was starting to matter. But here's the question for you. If a company can make millions while still breaking hearts behind the scenes, should it still be called successful? And if we all look closer, really closer, at the people around us, how many Davids would we find? I'm so sorry to pause here. Thank you for following this story all the way through. Now tell me, do you believe Claire truly changed? Or do you think it was only temporary guilt? If your CEO saw your real life, would they care enough to act? And one more thing, what did you think of this story? Comment 3 if you loved it, 2 if it felt average, or 1 if it didn't move you. We'd love to hear what country you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, please drop a heart, and share it with someone who believes that real leadership means seeing the people first.